Hey everyone, I wanted to make a new video talking about the Peltor ComTac IIIs and kind of comparing them again to the Howard Light Impact Sports. And I say again because I have made a video about this before in the past, but I'm redoing it because I didn't like how that one turned out. I had a different format going on, then it doesn't mesh with my current style, so that's why I want to redo it. And more importantly, I have now had these for several months. When I did that previous video, I only had the Peltor ComTac IIIs for a few weeks, maybe a month by that point, but now I actually have some serious use out of these, so there's a little bit more to talk about here, a bit more nuance, but I am going to be reiterating a few points that I made in that original video, because another thing is I'm thinking I might, because I don't like the style of that, I might unlist it in the future. We'll see. I'm normally not a fan of doing that, but I might, just because it is such a different style. But let's get into it here. So let's just get started with cheek weld and how the Peltors and the Howard Lights compare for getting the cheek onto a rifle. So I'm going to start with these. I'll just get these put on here. So starting with an AR-15, just because they are kind of super common. When I put this up, even if I kind of put it higher on my shoulder than I normally would, even then I'm still not getting it close to actually hitting the bottom of the Peltors, which is good. I'm also going to show it with my AK because that is what I normally use. So, and then same with an AK, it sits quite nicely. Granted, with this, I do have a pretty high scope mount, which I'm planning on getting a lower one, but even if I switch to the iron sights, you'll see it's still totally fine, but I'll do that right now. So, yeah, both with the scope and the iron sights, I don't have any collision between the Peltors here, or the earmuffs in general, and with the stock of the rifle. Even if I throw it up, again, even if I have the stock sitting pretty high on my shoulder, it still doesn't hit. I mean, it comes pretty close here, but just pulling it up normally, I don't have any issue. And it comes close, as I said, when I'm sitting at this high on my shoulder, but even then it still doesn't actually hit. If I have it where I normally have it, totally fine on space. Now for the Howard Lights, you can already probably notice I have something a bit different here, and that's that they're mounted to a helmet. And the reason for that, actually I'll show you it first with the AR. So let's get started. Pulling up the AR, it actually is hitting so bad I can't even get a proper cheek weld. I mean, granted, I did have the rear sight. So here, I'll pull the rear sight back up, and I can sort of get a cheek weld. I can aim down the sights, but it's really hard to do. Now, moving to why am I wearing a helmet? That is because, let me show you again, when it does hit right here, to get a good cheek weld, especially under recoil, it's going to want to push this up. So a long time ago, what I did to fix that problem was I removed the band, and I just straight up mounted these to a helmet. That way they can't go anywhere. Even if I'm pushing these against a stock hard, they don't move. They can't move. So it's not particularly comfortable. That was actually a big reason why I went away from these Howard Lights, is because I tried to wear these hunting, and I felt like I was gonna die because of how hot my head was getting, and just wearing a helmet when I'm walking up a mountain is a nightmare, as you might imagine. But still, I'll move on. Going to the AK now. So slightly reverse order from last time, just because I still have the scope pulled off, but I will put the scope back on. So just iron sights currently. I had the sling still on there. Anyway, it's about the same as with the AR, honestly. I can still see down the sights, but it's pretty tough. I'll put the scope on now. I had the scope covers on here earlier. I might cut out that footage so you won't know what I'm talking about, and I might just redo it with the Peltors, but yeah, earlier I was just lining up my eye with the center of it, but let's see how this works here. So, it works quite well. I actually don't get any collision with the earmuffs themselves and the stock now that I have it with the scope. But then again, as I said, this is a pretty high scope, which I don't like, because then, if you can see where it's hitting, I have a chin weld on this, so not comfortable when shooting. Granted, it's just a 5.45, so it's not the end of the world at all, but it's still not comfortable. But that's a bit beside the point. Yeah, it doesn't hit on this, so that's good. And since I realized I had the scope cover on, I was just kind of putting my eye in the center, but since I'm sure I'll get comments about it, I took the scope covers off and I'll do it again here with the Peltors. So yeah, it's still not colliding. I was just lining up my eye in the center of where the scope cover was, which is where the reticle is anyway, but I'm sure I would get comments about it if I didn't mention that. And yeah, it's still fine. To be fair to these Howard lights though, I did have the rifle pretty high in my shoulder just because I was putting it in the same position I was testing with the Peltor. But if I do put the rifle into my normal, just a good actual shouldered position, so quite a bit lower than how I had it earlier when I was testing the Peltor. And also, I don't have my glasses on, I'll touch on that in a moment. But yeah, if I go here, I can get onto the stock, at least with this AR, and I'll show it with the AK here in just a sec. But yeah, with this, I can get on it. It still does hit if I go, so if I just kind of throw it up, it's pretty easy to hit on it. But when I've also kind of pulled this up a little bit as well, but it's not impossible. Like, if you get these Howard lights, you're not gonna always hit it onto your stock of your rifle. But moving on to the AK now. So starting with the scope, just like before, we're still good here because I am getting a chin weld. If I take this off now, it is coming close to hitting, and if I move it around too much, it does hit. Like right now, it's kind of just ever so slightly. Here, let me get a bit better in frame for what I'm saying. So when I do get on here, I'm looking straight down the sights and coming pretty close to hitting, and just a tiny bit more and I do hit onto the stock here, but it is possible. I just wanted to make that point. I don't want to be unfair to these Howard lights because you can get it. It's just pretty difficult in my opinion. Now I wanted to talk about why I wasn't wearing glasses there. The reason for that is, as I mentioned, I had, just to give these a fair shot, I pulled these as far up as I could on the helmet. And one thing that happens when I do that is they kind of push onto my glasses and actually like dig it hard into my head. Extremely uncomfortable, so I just decided to not wear glasses when I was doing that. Which leads me to one more concern maybe some of you might have, is the fact that I did put these Howard lights onto a helmet, that maybe they're sitting differently than they would be if I still had them on the headband, and they're not. They are not at all. The way these are set up, they sit exactly the same. Admittedly, I can probably get it even a little bit higher, just ever so slightly, than I could when I used to have it on a headband. Obviously, I can't show you because I don't have the headband anymore, but it does sit more or less the same as when I did have it mounted on there. So it's not like it's sitting way lower when I have these mounted on the helmet. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason I put these on the helmet was because I was getting the stock colliding with it, especially from recoil. When the gun would come back, it would kind of hit, as you can imagine, because you saw even when I kind of gave these the fair shot, as I called it just now, it was still coming insanely close to colliding, even though at least I did manage to get it to not collide constantly here when I had it in the proper place on my shoulder. So if you do pull these Howard lights up, if you do have them on the regular headband, which most people do, if you pull them up high enough to where you would have no issue with colliding it with or hitting it against your stock, then you're probably going to start running into problems with it not getting a proper seal on your ears, which is a bit more of a problem on here than on the Peltors, because the Peltors come with these nice gel cups, which is something you can buy for the Howard lights, but it costs almost the exact same amount as the Howard lights themselves. So it's like, do you really want to spend the price of the entire set of earmuffs on just pads for the earmuffs, or cups for the earmuffs? It doesn't seem worth it in my opinion. And that is another thing, even if I do wear these Peltors quite a bit higher, because these do have gel cups, not only are they more comfortable, they also do get a better seal. But just on the topic of comfort right now, if I do put these on and wear them super high, even then it won't cause an issue with the arms on my glasses, just because they kind of conform better. The cups kind of conform better to my head. So putting these as high as possible, I don't feel any pushing on my glasses from the cups, which I do on the Howard lights. They are just regular foam on there, which isn't bad, but it's not as comfortable as it could be. In terms of size, these Peltors are a little bit smaller than these Howard lights, which does help to get that good cheek weld like I was saying earlier, but the difference isn't that much. It's hard to measure it. I tried earlier when I was off camera, and just because these aren't perfectly square, you know, or perfectly flat, it's hard to get an accurate measurement on it. You can probably find the exact dimensions on the manufacturer's site, but just holding them up together like this, you can see the Peltors are just a little bit smaller. So that's part of the reason why it helps with the cheek weld. And also, these are both quite thin. They're about the same in that regard in how thin they are, except these Peltors do get a bit wider when you get towards the bottom of them. If you're wearing these Peltors under something like a mid-cut or full-cut helmet like a Mitch, it should clear it, but I don't have one on hand to test it. So just take that for what it's worth. So everything I just mentioned was kind of stuff I already talked about in my first Peltor versus Howard light review sort of video. But now that it's been quite a while since I've got these, there's a few more points I wanted to make. And these would actually apply probably to those Howard lights as well if I still had them on the headband rather than on that helmet. And that is just something to think about with earmuffs in general that I wanted to mention. So that is wearing it with a hat. So especially lately, because it is winter where I'm at right now, I've been wearing a lot of heavier sort of beanies and stuff, and one thing I've noticed is that I'm not able to fit, as you might expect with a bigger one like this especially, I'm not able to fit the earmuffs over this properly. As you can see here, I can kind of just get it halfway on. But that's no surprise there, but what is maybe a little bit of a surprise is even on a very light beanie, I'm not able to get this on over it. So take for example this one, you can see how close it is to my head. If I put these on, you'll notice these do go on all the way and they sit right where they should be, but what I've noticed, because I've been wearing these a lot just with this hat and you know, this combo of stuff in the winter when I'm out at the range and whatnot, I've noticed that this starts to push down a lot. So this band here starts to push down a lot onto my glasses, and that starts to just give a pretty bad tension headache over a while because it's just ever so slightly pushing in here. That wouldn't be an issue if you're not wearing glasses, but if you're at the range, you should be wearing eye protection. That is something to consider, and honestly, just in general, there's so many times when you're just wearing sunglasses because you're outside, or just any sort of eyewear, it kind of gets annoying after, I don't know, about half an hour-ish is when I start to feel it, and then it gets really annoying after that. And I noticed the same sort of thing happens with baseball hats. There's just a little bit normally, you know, normally on these baseball hats, you just have this little bit of a band here on the sides of it, and just that little bit is enough to kind of also push down. This time, though, it's not even from my glasses. It just, something about how it pushes in, it just kind of gets uncomfortable after a while. So you can see it's kind of, this part of the earmuff is sitting up here, and it's kind of pushing into that. So that's also something to consider. The one type of hat I've noticed, or hat, that doesn't really have an issue with it is just a straight up regular head wrap. Does the job pretty well. It'll protect your head from the sun, and also it won't interfere with earmuffs if you're wearing any. It is sitting up here, but this is thin enough to where it doesn't cause any sort of pressure headache over time. Now all this is pretty nitpicky, but I still wanted to mention it since I feel like it's something you may not consider when you're first buying earmuffs, because I feel like that doesn't really come up a lot in other reviews, and it's not something I thought about either until I actually started wearing it a bunch, especially in the winter here now with beanies and all that so much. And I was showing the Peltors there. The Howard lights would do the exact same thing, again, if you had them on the regular band. One I suspect wouldn't have that issue is the Sordens, because, or one specific version of the Sordens. They have a version that has like a neckband, which seems like it'd be pretty low profile and it wouldn't interfere with glasses or a hat or whatever. In fact, I think they make it for wearing it underneath a helmet, so take that for what it's worth. Which brings me to my next point that I wanted to talk about is why did I choose Peltors in the first place over the Swordens, which I just mentioned, because that's a pretty good feature, having a neckband. So the reason that I chose these Peltors over Swordens is, again, this is kind of a point I mentioned in my first video, but, you know, just for completion's sake, I'm going to mention it here as well. On that note, you could just skip it if you want, just skip around in the video. So the reason for that is quite a while ago now, I went out of town and I went to a shooting range and rented a few guns to try out, and they had Peltors there, the shooting, just the cheaper kind of like shooting range type. I don't remember the name of them, but I'll link them or something. But still, I was really surprised at the quality, especially going from my Howard lights, which I was using at the time. And so after that, I was like, I just got to get these Peltors. And that's just why I chose them over the MSAs, over the Swordens. Just because I knew for a fact, because I had used them, that the Peltors are really good, really comfortable, and really good audio quality. This isn't going to become a review of the Swordens because I literally do not have them, but I've watched a lot of reviews on all of them, especially because I was considering buying Swordens. And I've heard that the Swordens have great audio quality as well, so if you're watching this video thinking about which ones you want to get, you know, I'm sure the Swordens are phenomenal as well. But I went with the Peltors because of that familiarity. And another reason that other people go with Swordens over Peltors is just because they don't need the comms capability. So these Peltors in their current configuration are just defenders, which just means, you know, hearing protection. But you can actually convert these to comms. If you look back here, you have the plugs, and I don't remember exactly what parts you have to switch out, but the place I bought these at, EnviroSafety, you could check there if any of you care. I'll probably link it in the description, or if I forget to, I'll put it in the comments. But you can very easily convert these to communications compatible if you do buy the hearing defense ones, that the Swordens do not have, to the best of my knowledge. Okay, so I just looked up the name of those other Peltors. They are the Peltor Sport Tactical. I had to do like 3 takes of that because I kept screwing up the word Peltor for some reason. Anyway, one question you might ask is, why did I choose ComTac IIIs, which are much more expensive than the Sport Tacticals, which are the ones that I used when I rented guns at that one range, as I mentioned. So the reason for that is the Sport Tacticals, they stick out a little bit more. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but they are a fair bit more, and that can be kind of annoying. You know, also, again, going back to the cheek weld thing, I wish I remember how low they sat, but I don't. But, you know, it's just another thing. It's like, if you want to save the money, I would say go for the other Peltors. They're much cheaper, but they still have the same audio quality as these. They don't have comms capability, though, but they're still really good. It's just they're a bit bulkier. So another consideration is Peltor earplugs, which they do make, or just any brand of electronic earplugs. The reason I didn't go with something like that for myself is because I feel like they're kind of easy to just lose. They are way smaller, you know. It's a lot easier if I want to go somewhere and I know I'm going to be like hunting, for example, to just throw these in the vehicle with me, and they won't slide around, or even if they do, it's easy to find where they fell, like if they fall off a seat or whatever, compared to earplugs. Even in their case, I feel like would be easier to lose. That's kind of I feel like a kind of whatever. But another reason, my father has a pair of Walker earplugs, so not Peltor, but one issue he has is he cannot hear anything when there is a slight bit of wind, just tiny bit, and you're gone on hearing. And I don't know, because I don't own Peltor earplugs, but I wonder if that would be an issue with them as well. That's not an issue with these because of the foam that they have here on both sides, so it blocks phenomenally well most of the wind noise. If it's crazy windy, which where I live sometimes it is, then I will still hear wind. It's like, what do you expect? But even in pretty moderate winds, it's not an issue. But on that note, that's another good thing about the Howard lights too. It's not something I've had an issue with there because they have the same foam on the microphones there. So as you can see here, Uh, here's the foam, and same on the other side. One other thing I mentioned in my original video that I want to kind of make a lot of nuance about in this one, and go into a bit of detail, is I mentioned I was having some really bad signal interference on my Howard lights in comparison to these Peltors. So I'm not going to be able to really let you hear it here, because back then when I recorded that video I had a different microphone which I could record the sound from inside the earmuffs on. But whenever they're on now, the Howard lights, not these Peltors, there's this constant chirping, and it sounds like you're listening to like a broken radio pretty much, and it's not great. They still work, but there is just kind of that going on in the background as just weird noise. And I don't have that with these. However, I do get a little bit of signal interference. Like right now I'm in my office, which you can't see, but I am actually in my home office. And so there's a lot of stuff emitting signals in here, as you might imagine, because there's computers and everything. And some of that clearly is interfering with these. So I can pick up a little bit of interference with these now. And a few times when I was hunting, I think I was walking, I couldn't see it, but I think I was like walking underneath some power lines, and was getting some weird interference from that. Or maybe it was just how radio was kind of, bouncing around off the mountains, because I was way high up then. But I don't know. At any rate, I do get that occasionally with these, so I can't say that these like don't have any interference at all, but it's not constant, which is the good thing. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is, while I have had these now for quite a while, I haven't had these anywhere near as long as I've had my Howard lights, which I've had for probably 4 or 5 years at the least. I don't know when I bought them. Unfortunately, I don't have the records to look it up like I do with these, but it was an extremely long time. And so I don't know if these will do it. We'll see. When I first got those Howard lights out of the box, though, they were, there's worse audio quality on them when compared to the Peltors. These have really nice audio quality. You get what you pay for. Which reminds me of another thing I wanted to mention about these Howard lights. So these take 2 AA's. The Peltors also take 2 AA's. These just go into a compartment just both on the left ear. There we go, as you can see here. And the entire time I've had these, genuinely, I have never had to replace the batteries. So these have some pretty incredible battery life. As I've said, I've had these for I don't know how long, but an extremely long time. And the same goes for the Peltors, though the caveat there is I haven't had them anywhere near as long as these. But I have not had to change the batteries out on these or on the Peltors yet at all, which is great. And speaking of battery compartments, I may as well show you. So the battery compartments on the Peltors, there is one on both sides. So here is one, and then the other is just in the same spot on the other side. To get these open, you just pull at the side tab. Here, let me get a bit closer. So to get these open, you just pull right here, and it'll just pop right off. And then, yeah, as you can see, I got a AAA in there. Same would go on the other side, so I won't bother showing that. Speaking of battery compartments, reminds me, I like the controls a little bit more, actually, on the Peltor. On this one, to actually turn them on, you just take this knob. So this is on the right side, unless I installed them backwards on my helmet. It doesn't really matter, they're on one side. So then you have a knob here to turn these on, and you just turn it, and that just increases the volume. And that initial click you heard is just it turning on, and then once it clicks back again, then it's turned off. And to turn the Peltors on, and actually off as well, there is a switch right here. So it doesn't matter which one you push, but you just push this down for a few seconds, and you'll hear a beep, and then they'll be turned on. And then you press these 2 buttons to increase and decrease the volume. This one in the front, when you're wearing it, would increase the volume, and this one in the back decreases the volume. This has an auto shut off after a few hours. I don't remember how long exactly. But once it's about to auto shut off, it'll start beeping at you a little bit, and you can cancel the auto shut off by just pressing one of these volume buttons again. And then, yeah, as I said, you just hold down the button and it'll turn itself back off manually if you want to do that as well. So that concludes this several month in review of the Peltors. I still like them a whole lot. I would still recommend them for sure. You kind of get what you pay for. Like, these are quite expensive, but I think I would definitely recommend them over the Howard lights. But you know, you can get several Howard lights for the price of just one of these, so I get it. It's something to consider, but my opinion is just get high quality, even if it is a little bit more costly out of the gate. So as of doing this video, I just found out that these ComTac IIIs have actually been discontinued by Peltor, and they've now replaced them completely with the ComTac Vs. So there are other versions of ComTacs. There's ComTac 6s, you know, a whole bunch of numbers of ComTacs, and they're slightly different, but the ComTac Vs are a true replacement of these. So that kind of puts the whole pricing, the difference in price between other hearing protection more into a bit more of an extreme focus, because these ComTac IIIs, if I remember right, I paid about $320 for them. But these ComTac Vs are about $450-ish from EnviroSafety, which is the site I was looking at. And of course the Howard lights are just around $50, and the Sordens are like $250 or $300, maybe, you know, around there somewhere. At any rate, definitely something now to kind of consider a bit more heavily, I think, because these are going to become, or rather are already hard to find ComTac IIIs now, because they have been, they are outdated now. So something to consider. It sounds like the ComTac IIIs have some really good changes made to them. It sounds like the audio quality is much better. They have better directional audio, but that's just what I've read about them. I'm not planning on getting them anytime soon, because I do already own these and they're still holding up perfectly fine. But that is something to keep in mind now, especially. Hopefully this was informative, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.